consistency does not mean perfect. Perfection is ultimately what holds you back from trying, because we'll never be perfect. We'll never get it right. We'll never get it to a T every single time. We might miss a day here or there. That doesn't mean that you're not consistent. 25 days out of 30 is consistency, growth in consistency.
This is the Own It Show, where we tell stories of how everyday people made ownership theirs.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Own It Show. I'm your host, Justin Roethlingshoefer. And if you guys are new here, I really encourage you and I invite you to go take a look at these past episodes because not only have I been able to really just express my heart and pour in a unique way, but all of our guests have been able to do that too. And the big theme of the Own It Show is being able to expose you to what life looks like pre-ownership and what life looks like post-ownership. Because life is extremely different. Life does not look the same when you're living in ownership to how it looks after. It's extremely different. It's quite transformational. And without having a guide, without having the roadmap of where to go, it can become very confusing. And sometimes you can even have the roadmap. You can truly have a map. I don't know if anybody remembers back in, this is dating myself now, but like early 2000s when you had to go onto MapQuest and print off the paper and you had the picture of this map and you knew how to get to where you were going. But as you started to go down your route, if you missed a turn, if there was construction, if there was a road closed, the map that you had in your hand was now useless. And that's, I think, how we often feel in our life is there's all of these people on social media talking about personal development and how to offering their maps for how to get to what they call a successful life, a fulfilling life, a life that is desirable, but it's somebody else's life. It's somebody else's map. We don't need a map. We need a GPS system. We need a GPS system that can ultimately start transitioning us and moving us through these difficult times of our life that we didn't plan or we weren't looking for. And that's what I seek to do with a lot of my guests. That's what I seek to do with a lot of these solo podcasts that I do, is allow you guys to have a GPS system, something that comes in and goes, you know what? I needed to hear that. That's what ultimately is going to start shaping and guiding me in the right direction. And if it just helps one person, that's all that matters. If it just speaks to one person that can create that change, that's all that matters. And so I really invite you guys not only to listen to them, but to share them, to like them, to leave a review so that ultimately we can reach more people. And the people that need to hear this can ultimately be reached with it. And it might just be one person, and that's okay. When I started this podcast, I did a post on this a while ago. My mom, my dad, and my wife were the only people that listened to this. It was getting like 10 downloads a month. And it was at a certain point, I looked at myself in the mirror, like, why am I doing this? What am I actually doing this for? And my mom would text me and say, I love the podcast. It was so great. Keep going. And now it's getting 10,000 downloads a month. And it's reaching people and touching people in a unique way. And so I say all that to say, please continue to keep liking. Please continue to keep leaving reviews. Please continue to keep sharing so that it can reach more people. Today, I want to dive in to something that's a little bit more personal to me. Is I know I start a lot of my talks and a lot of my story is based off of that realization when I was with my dad back in the car when I was 12 years old. And he looked at me and he said, son, talent will get you noticed, but consistency will get you paid. And that consistency, that word consistency, that idea of consistency is really what created the trajectory for my life of how can I become the most consistent version of myself? How can I take what I'm doing? How can I take this direction that I'm going in? How can I take my earthly experience, me, and be the most consistent version of myself every single day? And that's down to my habits. That's down to my behaviors. That's down to my nutrition. That's down to my exercise. That's down to the way I think. That's down to my practices that I engage in. Everything. How can I be the most consistent version of me? And I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and we were starting to talk a lot about consistency. And this individual had been struggling with consistency for a long time in their life. And the simplest things, waking up on time, going to the gym, eating the right foods, creating a travel framework that they knew what to do, but implementing it consistently as they traveled, because they traveled 7, 8 times a month. And there was this disconnect. There was this disconnect as to like, we know what to do. We have the plan. We understand the plan. We know why we're doing the plan. We realize that consistency is ultimately preparing us for what it is that we would need to step into and what's already prepared for us. But yet we can't be consistent with it. And then it all of a sudden came out. Consistency does not mean perfect. Perfection is ultimately what holds you back from trying, because we'll never be perfect. We'll never get it right. We'll never get it to a T every single time. We might miss a day here or there. That doesn't mean that you're not consistent. 25 days out of 30 is consistency, growth in consistency. We're not shooting for 365 days out of 365 days. We're not shooting for perfection. We're not shooting for 100%. Consistency is about being willing to try. Consistency is about being willing to listen. Consistency is about being willing to be obedient. And when we can reshift or readjust what our definition of consistency is, it ultimately empowers us to step into this new world that allows us to realize the results that only come with being consistent. Because if you ask anybody in any field doing anything, whether it's investing, whether it's relationship building, whether it's building a business, whether that's losing weight, getting fit, getting healthy, any of these things, raising kids, it's about being consistent and knowing what to expect. Because when we continue to be consistent, when we continue to show up in a certain way, there's something that comes along with that. Me, myself, I'm so transparent with this on social media, and I'm so transparent with that on this podcast, and hopefully it comes out to you guys, is my routines are no longer routines. They're instinctual to me. So I don't need to get up and go to the gym every day at 6 a.m. if I need a little bit more sleep that day, because I know instinctually my consistency will get me to the gym later in the day. But it took years of, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, going to the gym at a certain period of time at 6 a.m. in the morning or 7 a.m. in the morning, so that it became ingrained as a habit, as a behavior that I valued, that I truly took ownership of. And me going to the gym in the afternoon, or me skipping a day and going the day after, is still consistent. Or me missing the gym in the morning because I have to catch a flight at 9 a.m., but going and getting a 20-minute bike ride when I land because that's what I have time for, that is a part of consistency. 23 days out of 30 is consistent. 27 days out of 30 is consistent. We're shooting for consistency. We're not shooting for perfection. And when we start to think about this, what brings us down the road of consistency? What drives us there? It's about being truly convicted. You see, conviction is knowing something so deep in your soul, knowing that this is what you're called to do and ultimately to get to where you want to be. I knew that showing up day in and day out when Elise and I were starting Own It, that I was so convicted on what Own It was. People ask, how did you come up with the name Own It? It's not like we sat around a boardroom and went, hey, what should we call our company? What should this be? No. Elise would always tell me when we were in different arguments, or when she was challenging me on something, she would say, I need you to own this. Like, I need you to take ownership here. I need you to own it. And when we were sitting and we were having just a conversation randomly around a table one day, it was, hey, what's our company name? Own It. That's the name of it. That deep level of conviction, that deep purpose and reason behind what's here is what allows us and pushes us and ultimately pulls us to be consistent day in and day out. What it takes to build a business, to continually do the work. Does that mean we do the work perfectly every single day, that we work 15 hours a day and we go, and we're always at the exact same effort level, the exact same level of execution? No, that would be wild. That would be far too outside the norm of what would be expected. But we consistently show up and we consistently put in an effort. We consistently try and we consistently listen to what it is that we're being called to, so that we can be obedient to what it is that we're trying to execute on. And the only way to be convicted is by being connected. I know I talked about connection earlier. Connection came back to that concept of being able to be purposeful in something and truly knowing why you're doing it. And when you know why you're doing it, you can ultimately have the sustaining power, the staying power to do it for a long period of time to realize the results that's necessary. But that's where consistency comes from. You can't have consistency without being connected. You can't have connectedness and also have conviction. There's an order to how things happen. In order to be consistent, you have to be convicted. You have to take a stand for something. You have to take ownership of something. What is that thing? And we can throw out random thoughts, random feelings. I used to be the worst culprit of this. I would see somebody on a podcast, or I would see somebody starting a business. I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. That speaks to me. I want to do that. And I would spend 3 or 4 days going down that road, putting maybe a business plan together, thinking about how I should put some content out in that regard. And it would fizzle away because I got further away from the emotion of which it created within me, because I wasn't truly connected. That wasn't truly what I was supposed to be putting out there. That wasn't truly what I was supposed to be talking about. That's not truly what was supposed to be, what I was supposed to be creating. And because I wasn't connected, the conviction was fleeting. And because the conviction was fleeting, I wasn't consistent. There was no way there was going to be any staying power, any sustaining power, any long-term longevity to anything that I was doing in that realm. It required getting connected to what I was called to so that I could be convicted on what I knew I needed to do. And ultimately, I could be consistent in what was required of me. And when we see that, when we understand that, it ultimately opens up a whole new door. Just finished watching Limitless with Chris Helmsworth. And as you take a look, like, a lot of it was gimmicky, right? He's trying to do all these longevity type actions and the purpose and reason as to why he was doing them. And he was doing things such as like extreme strength feats, like climbing 100-foot rope 1,000 feet above the ground, dealing with stress and focusing on how he could ultimately become a better rope climber and use more of his body and his holistic muscles, to swimming 250 meters in the Antarctic just in a swimsuit, talking about cold immersion, spending 30 minutes in a sauna and sweating that out, and all of these 4 days of fasting, a water fast, like all of these amazing feats. But when you came back and you looked at it, the only way he was able to accomplish these things, and this concept that I'm going into, I think is overlooked in this whole Limitless video series that he did. He started as a beginner in everything. He'd never done cold immersion before. He had never spent lots of time in a sauna. He had trained before, but he had never really trained this way, because he'd only ever trained really for Thor, which was more of a bodybuilding exercise, weight gain, mass gain. He'd never been more on the functional side. He'd never fasted before. And so everything that he did, he was faced to look like a beginner. And oftentimes when we look like a beginner, we're scared to lean in and become consistent, because we're going to fail. We're going to fall. We're going to look stupid. When he was trying to climb the rope, it was so funny, is that he's this massive guy, this superhero. Literally, Marvel made him into Thor for the last decade. And he could barely get 5 feet off the ground climbing this rope. But with consistency, not perfection, not every day, not 100%, but consistency over 10 weeks, he was able to get himself from not able to climb 5 feet off the ground, but ultimately climb 100 feet of rope, 1,000 feet off the ground, fully suspended in air, and do it successfully. And that's just like you. You are able to do whatever it is you're wanting, but you have to have the sustaining power. You have to be consistent through conviction and through connection. And so again, as you guys move forward this week, I want to challenge you. Where are you lacking consistency? Or do you fear consistency because you feel like, wow, if I can't be perfect, there's no reason even starting or trying, because I know I'm not going to be consistent, showing air quotes there, because I can't be perfect. And perfection is actually what's holding you back from getting started to just take that first step. Is it that you went to the gym 3 days this week, and then 3 days the next, and then 3 days the next, and then 3 days the next, where up until previously you were going 0? That's consistency. Is it that you kiss your wife good morning every single morning and miss a few days, but consistently make the effort to kiss her good morning because that's what she's asking? Is it that 6 times a year, you're investing into a fund because you want it to show yourself that you want to build wealth, but it requires consistent investing. What does consistency look like to you? How are you able to take the life that you're wanting to get to, the life that you're seeking, the life that you're trying to move forward with? How do you take that and back it into, okay, how can I get connected to actually what I want? When you realize what you want, when you realize what God's calling you to, when you realize what that deep conviction is inside of you, that is the moment that you can become consistent. That is the moment you can execute a plan. That's the moment you can put a plan in place. We have to come back to this concept, guys. Success is not obscure. Success is different. It means it just requires you to live different. We all want to live different. We all want to feel different. We all want to think different, but it requires choosing different. And whether we like to think about it or not, the average, the norm in this world is not consistent. You don't know what you're going to get from them any single day. One day they're in, one day they're out, one day they're high, one day they're low. There is no consistency, but it's because they're not connected. It's because they're not convicted for something. They can't take a stand for something. They can't take ownership over it. But you listening to this podcast, you leaning in, you are different. You have a desire to be different. And so you can choose different. And by choosing different, it's going to yield you to be more connected. It's going to yield you to be more convicted, and it will yield you to be more consistent, because we know success is different. You can look, feel, and live different. So own your different. We'll see you next week.